Like his grandfather, Folco de Baroncelli, Pierre Aubanel is a bull breeder. He is today, with his sons, the last descendant still keeping the family's tradition. It's in the west of United States, in Montana, where began the history of the first French Western movies. We are in 1904. The last Indians' wars finally ended. But the admiration for the Far West heroes like Buffalo Bill is still well alive. In the south of France, the young Folco de Baroncelli discovers his own Far West, the Camargue. At the beginning of the 20th century, it's a region filled with swamps, infected by mosquitoes, and where just a handful of farmers live and work. Respecting the Indian values, where the harmony between man and nature is essential, Folco de Baroncelli fought with passion to defend this region. In those days, where are real estate owners concerned with the protection of nature? For them, the Camargue, it's just a non-profitable, swampy land that needs to be dried out so wheat can be planted. But the passion of Folco de Baroncelli defeated all those projects, and the Camargue remained unchanged. At first, the French Far West was limited to the suburb of Paris. In 1910, shooting movies outside in natural decor was an exception. Most are realized in studios or under the light of day. Film cameras are still too big and heavy to be easily used outdoor, so the French directors are ahead of their time in making action films the American style. The first films Western have titles such as The Desperado, Hanging in Jefferson City, $100, Dead or Alive. But in those days, neither the leading actors nor the directors are mentioned in the credits. Only the production company appears in big letters on the screen. So the stars of the first French Western movies stayed famously unknown. But Folco de Baroncelli is not only interested with the Camargue. His views are also turned towards the United States. As a teenager in his parents' domain, he develops already a passion for the Indians, after reading American authors such as Thelma Cooper. Later, he became a writer and published in New York in 1903 one of his short stories. They were translated in English and then in Indian for all his friends who couldn't master the language. In April 1905, Buffalo Bill is in Paris with his show, retracing the history of the conquest of the West. He will perform there for 2 months before starting a tour in all Europe.
Thank you for allowing me to introduce to you this Congress of Rough Riders of the Old West.
Traveling with 3 special trains, the Buffalo Bill Wild West Show is like a small city, moving around with 500 horses and 800 performers, authentic cowboys and real Indians. And the Big Top could welcome up to 8,000 people in the public. The show illustrates specific events of American history. Some of the main events of the conquest of the West, a parade of pioneer wagons, the stagecoach attack, etc., without forgetting the famous defeat of the General Custer at Little Big Horn. But life in France for the Native American Indians could have been much more difficult without Jules Laurin, a French scholar, who was the official translator for the Indians of the Buffalo Bill Wild West Show. Among them we could find Sioux leaders like Blue Shield, Jacob White Eyes, as they parade proudly in the streets of Paris. As the performance of the Wild West Show just ended, a small man sneaked inside the backstage of the Big Top. It's Folco de Baroncelli, He wants to make contact with authentic Native American Indians. He became friends with them and with Buffalo Bill. Later on, he offered him, as the show performed in the south of France, to hire guardians from his domain. In Marseille, in the winter, he met again his Indian friends, among them Sioux leaders, especially one, Jacob White Eyes. Their friendship was so strong that they continued to write each other even when Jacob went back home to America and until Folco's death. Folco de Baroncelli will tell about this historical meeting between Indians and the people from Camargue in an article published in the newspaper of the French Nobel Prize writer Frédéric Mistral. He wrote, "They are the last representatives of a superb and mysterious race that the whites are in the process of exterminating in the name of what they believe to be civilization." My grandfather invited Buffalo Bill and his cast to come to see the bulls, because it was like a little bit like in their country, where they had buffaloes. They were surprised to see the guardians looking like French cowboys and amazed to see how they round up the bulls on horse, and how it's also a tradition in Camargue to brand the animals. There was also a show with bulls free in a circus with men on horse. This was amazing for Buffalo Bill and his cast because at home they worked with buffaloes, and to imagine riders controlling bulls in a circle they couldn't understand. So they came to see that, found it was a great idea, and later on used it back home in the States. Folco de Baroncelli, a showman at heart, was also impressed by what he saw in the Buffalo Bill Wild West show. After creating new costumes for the Guardians, he invented games to underline their horsemanship talents, just like the rodeos in America allowing the cowboys to show their riding abilities. The house and domain of Folco de Baroncelli became naturally the perfect set for shooting the Western movies. Those Western movies were shot in my grandfather's home and around his domain, because Folco de Baroncelli was a very important character and person in this small village of Sainte-Marie-de-la-Mer. Lost in the middle of nowhere, and besides a few fishermen, there was nothing around. Of course, as the real Indians from the cast of Buffalo Bill were there, they were able to use real Indian costumes in the movies, giving them an authentic touch. Even Folco de Baroncelli discreetly used one, as we didn't recognize him in the movies. The stunts were done by the actor himself. There were no stunt double in those days. We have to be impressed when we see the actor jump from a bridge on a running train. Because remember, there was only one camera, one angle, and one take in those days. Look at that poor actor being crunched by the train. He must have prayed that the take was good. Like it was the case in isolated areas on the American West, The railroad appears in the early days in Camargue. The industrial exploitation of the salterns allowed the region to be reached by the train at the end of the 19th century. The movie industry will take advantage of this new mode of transport, ideal to create scenes for the Western films. They will also use the Camargue train employees. They were quite proud and happy to be working as extras in the movies. But maybe not so happy to be tied up on the rails in front of a coming train. But the French spectators don't have a clue and don't even think one moment that they are watching a film shot in Camargue, as the names of the characters and the places sounding like American names. Same thing for the American spectators on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, who have the opportunity to watch those French westerns, but persuaded that they are movies who were shot in the United States. It was such a pride for those French actors and directors to know that their movies were appreciated by the public and the critics in the States. At the time of the realization of those movies, the French cinema industry represents 80% of the films produced and distributed in the world. The big production companies like Gaumont and Pathé all created branches companies in the United States. So at the dawn of the First World War, the French movies companies had also started to shoot and make movies in United States. Strongly influenced by Western writing that he practiced in America, this Camargue breeder chose to crossbreed two different races of horses. The American quarter horse, traditional horse for the cowboys, and the Camargue, horse faithfully used by the Guardians and in the first Western films. This crossbreed, never attempted before today, gave birth to a new race, the Quarter Camargue, that should allow to bring together the qualities of strength and speed of the two races. A union between France and United States that is a great symbol of the continuous friendship between the two countries, and it shows that the Western way of life is still present in Camargue. Until the First World War, Foucault de Baroncelli kept in touch with his Sioux friends. The witnesses of this special privileged relation having all disappeared, the link had been broken for a long time. But today, on both sides of the Atlantic, nobody wants to forget. We know that Indians had a deep friendship with my grandfather, Foucault de Baroncelli. Even after the big top burned in Marseille, a lot of Indians stayed and made their homes here in Camargue and had children who are still living here today. Jacob Wide Eyes, who was his best friend, gave him his ceremonial costume. I've been told that this costume could be one of the most beautiful and authentic Indian chief costume existing today from that special time period. Since 1992, the Indians come every year on the grave of Foucault de Baroncelli to honor the memory of a great French defender of their cause, but also to rediscover the far-reaching region of Camargue that looked like their plains. And the name is the Land of Dawn.